everyone, this is Stephanie here asking you to hear me out. And today we're back with Steve Rose. Thanks for coming in again, Steve.
Thank you.
Before I get into anything though, I want to give you all a trigger warning. You might hear things that will set you off today, but I, along with my friends at Aegis Health Group, believe that in order to eliminate stigma, we have to talk about it. So we're all about creating safe and positive spaces for those going through the recovery journey, and that's what we're trying to do. So let's get started. So Steve, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we're talking about what are the root causes of addiction.
Okay.
So I think this is a nice debatable topic where people have all these different ideas about what's driving addiction, and did a little research on this, wrote an article, and I think this is something that we can really have some depth in, really dispel some of the myths about it. So there's a lot of myths around what's driving addiction, a lot of stigma around what's driving addiction. And I want to say a kind of a controversial statement, then we can kind of unpack that a bit.
Okay.
So the statement is drugs don't cause addiction. What are your thoughts when you hear that?
See, I'm an avid believer in that because drugs don't cause addiction. They're a symptom of something worse that's happening in life. And the addiction is a symptom of something worse that's happening in life, whether it be mental illness or some trauma that they've been through. That underlying cause, if we don't fix that, we can't fix the addiction. So I really don't think drugs cause addiction.
Right, and a lot of addiction involves drugs, but not necessarily, because you can have behavioral addictions like gambling, gaming, work, exercise, all these other things. So drugs are just kind of the vehicle to kind of cope with something else. Now, the Rat Park study. This is a very interesting idea that really highlights what this means. And I know you're familiar with the Rat Park study.
I love the Rat Park study. I think that was the best thing they ever did. It explains addiction quite well, actually.
Yeah, and so what this study is, I'll share for the viewers, is they had Bruce Alexander. He did this study. He's a Canadian psychologist, and he put a rat inside of a cage with drugs inside of the water, and with the rat left alone, isolated in this bare, boring, sterile cage, the rat will overdose every time. And they call this a Skinner box. It's the kind of experiment where this was the original model of addiction. Of course, the rat's going to be overdosing. The drug is so powerful that the rat can't resist. It overdoses. And Bruce Alexander redid this with a different situation. So instead of having the rat alone in the cage, he put several other rats in the cage. He made it into like a rat park. He put like a playground and all of this, and a little spinning wheel. The rat can run around, and they can interact with each other. And now in this environment, when you put the drugs inside the water, and then you also put the water that they don't have to necessarily have the drugs, the rats don't overdose apparently in this study. And whether there's a lot of controversy whether or not this is replicable, and they try to do this study again and with some kind of with different results sometimes. But either way, this kind of highlights that a situation is very powerful in driving addiction. It's not necessarily the drug that determines the addiction. It's the situation you're in can either lead to a higher risk of developing addiction versus a lower risk of developing addiction. So you put that in practical terms in our everyday lives, it really lends itself to the quote by Gabor Mate. He says, "Not why the addiction, but why the pain?" And that's the real question, is what's going on in your own metaphorical rat park in your life. What's your situation? What's your history? And one of the biggest things leading to addiction in the research is adverse childhood experiences.
That makes sense.
Trauma is a big part of that, and it's huge. But not everyone experiences trauma.
Very true.
And you might say, well, I haven't experienced one major event in my life. I never had that pivotal situation that I can say it all is because of that. But there's other, I guess they can say, subclinical versions of pain, which also can drive addiction. I know from your experience that would be more fitting
It really is. Growing up, I love my parents, and I know they were trying to do the best for me and trying to make sure that I did the best I could do. They were pushing me. And so I would get an A on a test, and it would be like, well, why didn't you get an A plus? Did you not study enough? Now, I know my parents were coming from the best place. They weren't trying to hurt me by any means, but that hurt because I felt like I wasn't good enough all the time. So having that anxiety about not being good enough, I think growing up, when I got into adulthood, I wasn't confident in anything I did. So the more I was doing, I was married, I had a kid, I didn't know what I was doing as a wife, didn't know what I was doing as a mom. Everything was kind of falling apart in my world because I didn't have this basis or the confidence to do what I was doing. And I think that's what led to my drug use, was just enough was enough, and I just could not handle feeling not good enough all the time.
Yeah, so that thought that I'm not good enough
Yeah.
goes way back, and it manifests in all these different areas just from childhood. Although you couldn't say, well, I was traumatized and this
No.
big thing happened. It was just this little drip of this, putting this thought into your head, which kind of became much bigger.
Yeah.
And in other areas, and then so now you're in your adulthood and you lose confidence in your ability to handle life, and it looks like the substances became a way to kind of cope with the anxiety of that thought.
I didn't have to feel the pain of it anymore. Because when you feel like you're not good enough, it's depressing, it brings you down. You actually feel pain over that. And with the drugs, I felt 10 feet tall and bulletproof. It didn't matter what this person or this person or this person thought. I was amazing. I needed to learn to recreate that feeling outside of my drug use.
Right.
And that took a lot of work. It really did. I had to be confident within myself. Even to this day, I still second guess myself all the time. But I have tools in place now that aren't drugs, so
Right.
it's a little bit easier to kind of walk through that stuff.
A lot of the traumas we've talked about that are not necessarily prior to the drug use. You said going into a lifestyle of heavy drug use can lead to traumas.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes that happens after.
Most of the trauma that happened in my life didn't happen until after I started using. Like that's where I got into the abusive relationships. That's where I got put in situations that most people don't get put in. That's where I was abused. I went through a lot of stuff in my addiction, and that's the trauma that I've been working through after my addiction. Before that, as far as I was concerned, I had a great life growing up. Like, yeah, my parents were hard on me, but I get why. I'm a mom too, and I want my kids to do the best that they can do. I think their approach was a little bit wrong, but I mean, the kids don't come with a book, so I get they were struggling and I was the first one too, so.
Right.
I was the guinea pig child, right?
Yeah.
So I get it, and I do understand like why things like that happen. But yeah, there was no trauma in my childhood. I wasn't abused. There was nothing that would have led me to use drugs later on. Just this. And I think there was some underlying mental illness that I didn't really know about at the time. Like I had been diagnosed at 16 with general anxiety disorder and severe depression.
Yeah.
I literally think every teenager could be diagnosed with these two things if you talk to them long enough. But yeah, it wasn't until my adult years and I started really like doing my research on it and saying, okay, yeah, this is something that's happening without me even triggering it anymore. So learning how to go through that process and get put on the medications for that and starting to deal with those things made it easier to not want to go and use. So it made the addictions programs I was using actually work. Recovery is not easy. It really isn't. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Just trying to learn how to relive a life normally, learn how to have tools to kind of navigate some of the stuff that I was going through, and try to do it while I was healing, because our brains are all trumped up after, and it takes a minute for them to start balancing out again. And so like that was a lot.
And when you say the tools to recover and the kind of coping tools, what are some of the more helpful ones you found to deal with the underlying pain that's really driving the addiction? Like what have you found the most helpful kind of cognitive behavioral tool?
Definitely taking a minute out. Sometimes I have to do a lot of self-talk. So if I'm going up against something that's really, really overwhelming and really, really big, I might have to sit down for a few minutes and say, okay, you've got this. You can do this. You've done things in your life that are just as big as this, so let's get to it. Now I can actually look back and say, no, I am doing better, because look at all that I've done and look at how far I've come. So I think that kind of helps too, is having those successes and having those things behind kind of motivate me to keep going and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and the small wins creating motivational momentum.
Yes.
It snowballs, and the more progress you get, the more you see.
It's just like addiction. As addiction snowballs into something really, really big, recovery can snowball too.
Just the other way. It's like the downward spiral versus the upward spiral.
It's a lot harder pushing a snowball up a hill though.
A lot harder pushing up a hill, yeah. Working with someone in a collaborative way to help them have that little separation from their thoughts, to be able to step back for a second, to look at them, and to kind of move forward with them still there. And it's a different relationship to the thoughts. Because, addiction, it comes from the root word dictator. Addiction, dictator, the thoughts as dictating what you're doing. So you are almost like a slave to the thought. And that's the thought, and the pain of the thought, the pain of I'm not good enough. And then it's so coming out of that, separating from that dictator, that thought dictator, and then moving forward in valued directions anyway is really kind of that process of how to do that, and walking someone through that collaboratively, because you can't tell someone that necessarily. No. If I were to tell you, oh, don't worry, it's just a thought, do it anyway, you're not gonna believe it.
It won't change anything that I'm thinking.
Yeah, and that's the therapeutic process, is really kind of working through these things in a very slowing it down, looking at the history, and developing some of those tools to thoughts like your hands, for example. If your thoughts are way up here, and you're going around with your thoughts just right in front of your face, how you're not going to be able to look. You're going to be stumbling around. You're going to run into the walls. Now, the therapeutic process slowly brings them out. Okay, now they're clear in focus. You can see them. But you can also see past them, and where do you want to go now?
That was a huge thing in my recovery, is that goal setting. A lot of times, like when I first started in recovery, I would set like some huge goal that I thought I could attain, and then it would fail because it was so out there that it wasn't actually reachable. So I was kind of setting myself up for failure. It's when I realized that I had to start smaller, think smaller, and start with one thing, then the next thing, the next thing, then the next thing. And then after a while you look back and you're like, oh my God, look at how far I've come, and look how much I've built and how much I've done. That's what's made it a lot easier, is setting those goals so that I have those successes. So those thoughts still come up, but they're less and less and less, because I can turn around and I can, as soon as that thought comes up, well, no, I'm doing this. Look, I've been doing this. So who are you talking to? I'd say recovery is a multi-pronged approach. It really is, because there's no one set thing that works. You need to take things from everything. I still have people I can call. I still have counselors that I see. I still have programs that I go to. And these are the ways I'm navigating everything now. I'm always going to have those thoughts, no matter what, no matter how long I live. I'm still going to think every once in a while that, hey, that wine might be a good idea, or that pill might be a good idea. Yeah,
exactly.
That doesn't go away.
It won't. Yeah. So it looks like you've been able to navigate and live with them in a different way, and that's the whole process.
Yeah, for 4 years now. Tomorrow might be a different day.
Yeah.
So we're gonna cut it off here, because there's a lot we could talk about. We could do these videos for hours and hours, but I'm sure you guys have stuff to do today. So just want to let you know, if you or someone you know needs help, make sure to contact Aegis Health Group. They're amazing. They did wonderful things, and they've helped me out. Also, make sure to drop a like or a comment by following Aegis Health Group on Facebook or Instagram, and subscribe to hear me out on YouTube. Smash the like button. All right, everybody, I hope you have a great week. Looking forward to talking to you in 2 weeks.